Chapter 3 8 Poet Mystics. I eat God and drink God. I sleep on God. I give God and take God. All my actions are with God only. Janabai. While the poet mystics of Maharashtra came from different backgrounds and lived diverse lives, they all shared one dominant trait. They lived as intimates of the Lord. With the transcendent name constantly on their lips and the Lord in their hearts, every action they performed, every word they spoke, every interaction they had was imbued with God's love. As Eknath says, inside and outside I see God. Sleeping, waking, dreaming, I'm always enjoying the vision of God. Stories of their lives and deeds reflect this intimacy, highlighting how they came to realize their connection with the divine, and how their every action was lived as an expression of that one true relationship. These tales and legends bring the spiritual message of the mystics to life, portraying their wondrous qualities in ways that people can relate to and easily remember. When reading stories of the lives of the saints, one may keep in mind that the point of the stories is not so much to give a factual history, but rather to show the qualities of the saints and their unbroken relationship with the Lord. The stories also act as striking frames for the spiritual message, since the words of the mystics are often interwoven into the tales. As legends are handed down orally across the generations, different versions take shape. Some of the stories have their origin in the compositions of the mystics, and some have been collected by historians and biographers. Some biographers have not differentiated between legend and fact, so their accounts do not so much reflect historical accuracy, but rather how the mystics are remembered and loved by the people. In this chapter, no attempt has been made to decipher which stories may be historically accurate and which are not. The tales have been presented simply as teaching stories, tales much loved by all those familiar with them. In the accounts of their lives, the inner relationship between the mystics and the Lord has often been depicted as taking place in the physical world. The Lord works alongside them, talks to them, comes to their aid, and sometimes performs miraculous feats that may seem exaggerated or implausible. With the natural human attraction for the spectacular and sensational, people will often focus on these fabulous miracles rather than the message of the mystics. Samarth Ramdas cautions us against this tendency. Referring to people who judge the greatness of spiritual teachers by the miracles attributed to them, while ignoring the real value of their teachings, he writes, "Vainly do people believe everything that they hear. They throw away jewels and gather fuel cakes of dung. Who can help these people if they wander like blind cows?" Justice M.G. Ranade, 1842 to 1901, the distinguished scholar and social and political reformer, echoes this sentiment. The moral interest of these biographies centers, however, not in their miraculous feats, but in their, the mystics, struggles, and in the testimony their lives afforded in vindication of the eternal verities of the moral law and man's higher spiritual life. These testimonies have inspired generations of Maharashtrians to seek the refuge of intimates of the divine, to find a teacher and mentor, and adopt the bhakti way of life. The relevance of these stories has not diminished with the years. They rang with truth in those times and still do today. Jnaneshwar, the embodiment of true knowledge. The foundation of the bhakti movement in Maharashtra was laid by a family of 13th century mystics, Jnaneshwar, his sister Muktabai, and his two brothers Nivritanath and Sopandev. Footnote: Jnaneshwar is also known as Jnanadev. End footnote. The names of these mystics represent 4 aspects of spirituality: detachment from worldly life, Nivritti, Lord of Knowledge, Jnaneshwar, and the rising steps, Sopan, which lead to liberation, Muktabai. All members of this remarkable family died young, yet they left a legacy that revolutionized spiritual life in Maharashtra. As Changdev, a great yogi who became Muktabai's disciple, said of them, "Jnanadev drank to his fill the water of pearls. Nivritanath caught in his hands the blessed shade of the clouds. Sopandev decorated himself with a garland of fragrance. Muktabai fed herself on cooked diamonds. The secret of all 4 has come into my hands." Their parents were a disgraced Brahmin couple who had lost their standing because the husband, who was deeply spiritual, had taken initiation into the life of a renunciate, but later was ordered by his guru to return to married life. For a renunciate to return to family life was considered against the scriptures and therefore a disgrace. So the children, who were all born after his return, were treated as outcasts by the other families in the village. The other children would not play with them, nor could they attend school with the others. It is recounted that the children came into contact with the inner mystical path when they were threatened by a tiger one day. They all scattered, and Navritanath, still just a youth, fled in panic into a cave where he met Gahinanath, a mystic of the Nath sect, associated with devotion to the divine inner sound. Gahinanath initiated Nivritti, and Nivritti initiated Jnaneshwar, Sopandev, and Muktabai. Both parents died while the children were still young, and the children found themselves not only shunned outcasts, but destitute orphans. Their parents had wanted all 3 sons to undergo the thread ceremony, the Hindu initiation rite, and had asked the priests of their village for permission, saying that the children should not have to suffer for the parents' faults. After their parents' death, the priests told the children they could go to Paitan, a place famous for its learned scholars, to get authorization for the performance of the ceremony from the pundits there. But the pundits of Paitan refused and mocked the children for their names being connected with spiritual enlightenment. One of the priests pointed to a buffalo and remarked sarcastically that it too was called Jnaneshwar, Lord of Knowledge. Highlighting Jnaneshwar's understanding of the oneness of all beings, it is related that Jnaneshwar replied, "Yes, there is no real difference between this buffalo and myself, as we both have the same soul. Divinity resides in all things, just as gold is the same in all ornaments, however different the ornaments may appear." So the pundit tried to provoke him, saying, "Then why not make the buffalo recite the Vedas?" The story goes that when Jnaneshwar placed his hand on the back of the buffalo, it did indeed recite the Vedas, and everyone present was amazed and impressed. Although permission for the thread ceremony was still not granted, the children began to be treated with respect and were granted permission to study with the pundits. The children's grasp of spiritual truth was remarkable considering their young age, and spiritual compositions flowed from their pens. Seeing that the priests were enmeshed in rites and rituals, Nivritanath asked his brother and disciple, Jnaneshwar, to write something to explain the path of devotion. This work, Bhavarth Deepika, Light on the Inner Meaning, a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, which later became known as the Jnaneshwari, is said to have been completed when Jnaneshwar was only 15. Written in Marathi rather than Sanskrit, so it could be understood by all people, this voluminous text is a masterpiece of Marathi literature with its mystical insight, depth of spiritual wisdom, and brilliant writing. His Pasayadan, a prayer for the well-being of humanity, is included at the end of the Jnaneshwari. The message of the Jnaneshwari is summarized in a section in which Jnaneshwar discusses the highest and true knowledge. He says that this knowledge is our own, but it seems foreign to us because of our attachment to the impermanent things of the world and its heavens. This true knowledge is like fire, while knowledge of the illusory world is like straw before it. Because we recognize only this world and its heavens, we consider duality to be real. True knowledge enables us to attain purity and a state of complete emancipation. Those who stay still and control their minds reach the level of God Himself. They become eternal through His eternity, perfect through His perfection, and merge into the One. Considered by many to be the Bible of Maharashtra, the Jnaneshwari became an inspiration to the mystics who followed Jnaneshwar, and it has been translated into many languages, Indian and foreign. Nivritanath then wanted Jnaneshwar to write an original work. The Jnaneshwari is a commentary. So Jnaneshwar wrote the Amrit Anubhav, Nectar of Experience. His objective in this work was to bring to the common people awareness of the one supreme reality that infuses the entire creation, knowledge that had formerly been hidden in the Sanskrit texts. He says, "I am serving the sweet nectar of mystical experience. May everyone in the universe enjoy this feast." Jnaneshwar was a prolific writer. Besides the Jnaneshwari and Amritanubhav, he wrote a number of works including Changdev Pasashti, Advice to Changdev, a Hatha yogi with great yogic powers. A story that is told about how Changdev Pasashti came to be written illustrates the primacy of bhakti over paths that merely give various powers. After hearing of the greatness of Jnaneshwar, Changdev wanted to write to him, but he did not know how to address him. He said, "I cannot address him as son because I want to be his student, and I cannot address him as father because I am so much older than he is." He therefore sent just a blank page to Jnaneshwar. Jnaneshwar replied in 65 Pasasht verses. Thus the name Changdev Pasashti, 65 verses to Changdev. One of the verses read, "Apart from name and form, we two are really the same. Be happy in the realization of this supreme identity." It is recounted that Changdev was unable to grasp the meaning of this verse, and therefore set out to see Jnaneshwar. Surrounded by his disciples, the proud yogi rode a fierce tiger, using a snake as a whip. When Jnaneshwar saw Changdev's egoistic display, he made the wall on which he and his sister and brothers were sitting move forward to meet Changdev. When Changdev saw the lifeless wall moving towards him, he was astounded. He realized that the ability to perform miracles was not special, and his pride vanished. Dismounting from the tiger, he prostrated himself before Jnaneshwar. Changdev entreated Jnaneshwar to accept him as his disciple, saying he had realized the worthlessness of yogic powers. Jnaneshwar asked his sister Muktabai to initiate Changdev and impart to him the sacred knowledge of the means of attaining God realization. In deference to the wishes of her brother, Muktabai accepted Changdev as her disciple. Although Changdev Pasashti is a short work, it contains the quintessence of Jnaneshwar's philosophy. Here, Jnaneshwar explains bhakti, a path that is to be practiced in order to experience the oneness of the divine, not talked about or used to display one's powers. Jnaneshwar also wrote a few hundred abhangs in which he described the sweetness of the name, the immanence of God, the greatness of the Guru, the folly of religious superstition and hypocrisy, the futility of asceticism, and the supremacy of the bhakti path. Although Jnaneshwar is remembered as the pioneer of the bhakti movement in Maharashtra, he attributed all his wisdom and talent to his guru and brother Nivritti. He wrote verse after verse praising his guru. He says, I was a blind man and a lame man, and illusion had encircled me. My hands and feet were unable to work. But then Nivriti initiated me into spiritual knowledge by seating me under a tree and dispelling all ignorance. Blessed be the spiritual wisdom of Nivriti. Blessed be the name of God. Jnaneshwar is praised as one of the greatest of spiritual scholars. He not only wrote works of deep philosophy and lyrical poetry, but also had insight into the physical world beyond that accepted in his time. Dr. R.D. Ranade, 1886 to 1957, known to his disciples as Gurudev, a distinguished scholar, professor, and spiritual teacher who wrote a number of books on mysticism, says, "Not only is he loved as a superb poet, Jnaneshwar is also seen as a sage of the highest order. In praising his master, he compared him to the sun, which only appears to move because it is seen to rise and set, but which does not really move." Here he presents a heretofore unaccepted fact about the physical universe that prompted one commentator to note, "It is a matter of great astronomic interest that this mystic philosopher should have put forth a heliocentric theory at a time when heliocentrism, the theory that the Earth revolves around the sun, was hardly recognized in Europe." Because of the beauty of his style and his ability to communicate subtle mystical philosophy, Jnaneshwar is referred to by many as Jnanadev, the Lord of Knowledge, and Jnani Yancha Raja, King of the Knowledgeable Ones. However, his devotees called him Mauli, Mother, because it was not so much his literary might or intellectual talent that inspired them, but his unbounded devotion and love. Namdev, tailor of the robe of Nam. The tailor Namdev sat in the shade of a tree and took out some chapatis for his meal. He had just placed the chapatis down next to him and taken out butter for them when a dog snatched the chapatis and ran off with them. Still holding the butter in his hand, Namdev sprang to his feet and ran after the dog in pursuit, pleading, "Lord, do not eat dry bread. Let me give you butter for your chapatis." This small tale is often told to show the essence of Namdev's philosophy, a way of thinking no different from that of all mystics. Namdev taught that since God is one and is the life of every being, then all beings, no matter how humble, should be treated with compassion and generosity. One string holds hundreds and thousands of beads. God is the thread which runs through them all. Born into a family of generations of tailors in 1270 at Narsi Bamni, Maharashtra, Namdev was devoted to the Lord from an early age. In one of his poems, it is recounted that when he was only 5, Namdev was sent alone to the temple to make an offering of milk in his father's absence. Believing that the idol actually drank the milk his father offered each day, Namdev waited for the idol to drink. When the milk remained untouched, Namdev thought that the idol refused to drink because his devotion was lacking, and he resolved not to leave the temple until the Lord drank his offering. The Lord could not help but respond to his innocent faith. He drank the milk, and Namdev's devotion was fortified. Namdev learned the tailoring profession from an early age, but as he grew older, his sole interest was devotion to God, and his tailoring business suffered. As a result, the family experienced financial hardship, and both his mother and his wife grew angry, not only with Namdev, but also with God. Eventually, however, all of Namdev's family came to realize the value of devotion, and ultimately 13 family members, as well as Janabai, the household maid, became followers of the mystic way and composers of abangs. Namdev dedicated his life to Lord Vittal, who was worshipped in the temples in the area, and he began giving satsangs filled with love and devotion. Footnote: Vittal was the name of the god worshipped in many temples of Maharashtra, but the saints of Maharashtra also used this name for the Supreme Lord, who they said dwelled not in temples, but in devotees' hearts. End footnote. It is said that when Yaneshwar and his family learned of Namdev's piety, they invited him to visit them. When he arrived, the mystics bowed to him in respect, but Namdev did not bow to them in return, thinking that they were bowing to him because they considered his devotion to be superior. Reading his thoughts and sensing that he was still egoistic, Muktabai said, "The great Saint Gora, who is a potter, is here. Let him test whether we are all properly baked pots." Gora then tapped each of their heads with a wooden board to test them. No one felt any pain except for Namdev, who cried aloud. Gora then declared that Namdev was the only unbaked pot among them. Yaneshwar explained to Namdev that he was seeing the Lord only in Vittal, but he should see Vittal in each and everything, and for that he should seek guidance from a master. He advised Namdev to seek out the mystic Visoba Kesar and ask to be his disciple. As deeply hurt and disturbed as he was by this event, Namdev later recognized the wisdom and truth of what he had been told. He traveled to Aundia to meet Visoba Kesar. Upon his arrival, he paused at a temple to rest and discovered an elderly leper sleeping on the floor with his feet resting on a statue of Shiva. Angered at this irreverence, Namdev rebuked the old man sternly, asking him to remove his feet from the idol. The leper replied, "Child, please remove my feet from the idol and put them where God is not." It is recounted that wherever Namdev placed the old man's feet, there the idol moved. This had a profound effect on Namdev, giving him the understanding that God is everywhere and dwells not only in the idol, but in everything in his creation. Bowing at the man's feet, Namdev prayed for forgiveness. When he asked for the leper's name, he was astounded to learn that the man was none other than Visoba Kesar. So Namdev begged for initiation. Visoba Kesar asked Namdev to lift him and carry him out of the temple. Namdev, rid of all aversion for the leper, gently took the old man in his arms and carried him outside, where he was transformed into a handsome and magnetic young man. Showering his love and grace on Namdev, Visoba Kesar initiated Namdev into the path of devotion. After his initiation, Namdev remained with his guru for several months. Imbibing the nectar of Visoba Kesar's wisdom, his egoism left him, and he achieved God realization. His temple was no longer the narrow space along a riverbank in Maharashtra, but rather the entire creation. His God was no longer an idol, but the all-pervading and infinite Lord. Both within and without, and in all forms of life, Namdev now saw the Lord. He was no longer an unbaked pot. Namdev and Yaneshwar had deep respect for each other. When Yaneshwar invited Namdev to accompany him on his travels to various holy places in India, Namdev agreed, and they traveled hundreds of miles together, meeting seekers hungry for divine realization and spreading teachings of the bhakti path. A story told about their travels illustrates how Namdev relied not on his own spiritual powers, but only on the Lord. Passing through an arid tract of Rajasthan, Yaneshwar and Namdev grew extremely thirsty. When they finally came upon a well, they found that the water level was too low to access. Yaneshwar, however, was able by means of his yogic powers to reduce himself to a very small size, glide into the well, and drink his fill. He offered to bring water from the well for Namdev, but Namdev refused. He was prepared to die if such was God's will. It is said that the Lord, seeing his plight and his complete reliance on the Almighty, came to Namdev's rescue and, the water came up in a roaring surge and overflowed the well. Upon their return, Jnaneshwar was called back to the Lord, and his brothers and sister passed on soon afterwards, while still in their 20s. So Namdev lost the support of this remarkable family. When only about 27 years of age, Namdev embarked on a period of extensive travels, teaching the path of bhakti wherever he went. It is believed that he set out on foot alone, living an itinerant life for about 35 years. His travels included Bihar, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, and Punjab, where he attracted many devotees and followers, despite differences in language, habits, and customs in the different places he visited. He finally settled at a place known as Guman in Gurdaspur district of Punjab, where he lived for 18 years, spending his time in meditation, delivering satsangs, and writing abhangs, some of which are included in the Adi Granth. His profound teachings were expressed most simply. My goal is the Lord. My destination is the Lord. Namdev is thought to be foolish. Let those people think they are wise. When love made its home in my heart, I left a life of luxury to live simply. When the Lord's grace descended on me, I learned I had been a slave, but now I am a king. Says Namdev, I sing the praises of the Lord in human form. At his feet, I've obtained divine treasure. It is thought that Namdev died circa 1350. Some say in the Punjab, some in Maharashtra, his devotees wishing to claim him wherever they lived. Janabai, beloved daughter of the Lord. In 13th century India, a devoted couple named Dama and Karun lived on the banks of the river Godavari in Maharashtra. They were sad because they had no children, so they prayed to Lord Vittal for a son. One night, Dama dreamed that he would not have a son, but a very good daughter. He was told that he should hand her over to Damasheti, a tailor by caste, and that she would be blessed by her association with Damasheti's son, who was going to be a great saint. Shortly afterwards, Karun gave birth to Jani, who came to be known as Janabai. Bai is a respectful honorific. When Jani was just 5 or 6 years old, Karun died, and Dama took her to Damasheti because his health was also failing. Soon after Jani arrived in Damasheti's home, his wife Gonabai gave birth to a son whom they called Nama, the person who would later be known as Namdev. Jani took care of Nama from his infancy. Over the years, Damasheti's family grew to 14 members, so Jani cared for Nama as well as doing the domestic chores, such as sweeping and cleaning, bringing water from the well, grinding the corn and wheat, gathering firewood, and cooking and washing the utensils and clothes. As the family grew, so did her responsibilities. As a servant, a low-status woman, and an orphan, Jani was an outsider in the religious community and in most social groups. Fortunately, her deep love and devotion for the Lord comforted her. From her poetry, we see how her burdens did not trouble her because she kept the Lord's name on her lips and his presence in her heart. She sang as she worked because she had surrendered to the Lord and knew in her heart that he was taking care of her. If the Ganga flows to the ocean and the ocean turns her away, tell me, O Vittal, who would hear her complaint? Can the river reject its fish? Can the mother spurn her child? Jani says, Lord, you must accept those who surrender to you. Jani believed that when she turned to God, God turned to her. With the simplicity of deep faith, she knew that her Lord was not far away in some heaven, but was sharing all of her life with her. Janabai's worldly life was hard, but she saw every task as spiritual work for the Lord. so every task brought her closer to her beloved. Whether working or eating, sleeping or awake, she was always with the Lord, constantly repeating his name. She felt the Lord cared for her and talked to her like a mother or a friend. And she talked to him like his beloved child. Mother is dead, father is dead. Vittel, please take care of me now. He takes oil and comb in his hands. He combs and braids my hair and finishes the braid in a knot. Johnny says, now rub my back. Oh Lord, this is your celebration of those who are helpless. Johnny has had enough of birth and rebirth, but how will I repay my debts? You leave your greatness behind you to grind and pound with me. O Lord, you become a woman, washing me and my soiled clothes. Proudly you carry the water and gather cow dung with your own 2 hands. O Lord, I want a place at your feet, says Johnny, Namdev's servant. Janabai even talked with God like an impudent child. Such was her ease and intimacy with him. I have no fascination for you, God. I am not going to serve you anymore. You are not kind and generous. Why do you carry such pride of greatness? What will you gain by getting angry with me? We devotees are the source of your strength. You have no power of your own. Hari, I know your secret. Footnote. Hari, a name for God. End footnote. As her devotion grew, she came more and more under the influence of Namdev and Yaneshwar. When family members used to get angry at Namdev for not paying attention to his work and for not earning a good living, only Johnny understood his need to give precedence to the Lord's devotion. It is said that she was so loyal to Namdev that even though she wanted to escape from the cycle of birth and death, she said that she was willing to come back over and over again if she could serve Namdev in every life. Although she had no formal schooling, the influence of the spiritual environment around her, her wholehearted devotion to the Lord, and her natural poetic genius impelled her to compose many beautiful abangs on spirituality. In this life, we should live as if we were the shadows of our body. We should surpass the earth in forgiveness, be milder than butter and lighter than a flower. Fortunately, about 300 of her compositions were preserved along with those of Namdev. Janabai's poems indicate her depth of inner experience. She tells of hearing the divine sound and of seeing the eternal flame, as well as experiencing the inner regions of Bhavar Gufa and Daswandwar. Footnote. Bhavar Gufa, the 4th inner region. Daswandwar, the 3rd inner region. End footnote. She says that the form of God came upon her like a flood, which was difficult for her eyes to behold, and she was unable to describe the great flame of his light that shone before her. She saw the Lord everywhere and realized that there was no place where he was not. In one of her poems, Janabai writes, I know in my heart that whatever I've wanted, the limitless Lord has given me. He has claimed this body. I know it's not mine. He has taken myself and given me peace. He uprooted my anger. In its place, clear thinking now makes its home. God, the great giver, says Johnny, has given me a home in him. All she wanted was her Lord. Give me only this gift, O Hari, that I shall always sing your sacred name. Fulfill my only desire, that you will accept my humble homage and service. This is all that I desire. Have mercy on me and fulfill my desires. I want to concentrate my eyes and mind on you, and have your name on my lips. For this the maid Johnny falls at your feet." Janabai was so filled with the Lord that she said that it was actually Vittal who composed her poems for her. Speaking as Vittal, she says, "I wrote down Johnny's words as she uttered them, Jnaneshwar. Let it be known to you, this has not made me any less divine. The absolute truth is the paper, and with the ink of eternity, Vittal writes on it incessantly with Johnny." What greater praise could be showered on a devotee than her teacher's tribute to Janabai? Johnny's abhangs are composed by God himself. All the saints listen to her religiously. Blessed is Johnny, blessed is her devotion. Namdev so praises her. Choka Mela, pure of heart. Choka was a low-caste laborer who removed animal carcasses from villages and farms. Many in society viewed him as polluted because of his position, but he was a devotee of such purity that he came to be known as Choka Mela, meaning Assembly of the Pure. Choka was born in the latter half of the 13th century. He was married to Soirabai, and his sister Nirmala was married to Soirabai's brother, Banka. This was a unique joining of two families, for all of them, Choka, Soira, Banka, and Nirmala, as well as Choka and Soira's son, Karmamela, became devotees and composed abhangs prized for their sweetness, humility, and infinite love for God. In spite of their poverty and low social position, Choka's family faced life with courage, fortitude, and boundless faith in the Lord. Choka lived in constant remembrance of the divine and composed his inspiring abhangs in the midst of his adverse worldly circumstances. Choka explained that the Lord lives in all, therefore no one is higher or lower than another. It is recounted that because of his caste, Choka was not allowed inside the temple, and therefore used to sit outside the temple and sing praises of the Lord. But the priests would not allow even this. They continued to harass him, and he was beaten severely. In anguish and sadness, he would sing of his predicament, trying to explain that his entry into the temple would not pollute any person or any place. On this sacred earth, all people walk alike and enjoy its fruit. Similarly, we all bathe in the holy Ganges to wash away our sins. The earth and the Ganges are common to all, irrespective of caste, creed, and religion. Likewise, the temple and the Lord, the abode of love, are common to all. Hence, my entry into the temple and worship are not defilement. Choka Mela's poetry speaks of a life of such devotion that he saw God everywhere. God delights in those whose minds hold an unbroken flow of Simran. No end to happiness through Simran. Wherever you look, you'll see God displaying himself as the universe. You and I will be one, not two. Choka was a disciple of Namdev and credited his guru with everything he achieved. He says of his first meeting with his master, "Blessed is this golden day, for today I met Namdev. He has granted me what was mine. He has delivered to me my heritage. He has endowed me with the treasure of love divine. He has unfolded the vision of God within me. The difference between me and you has vanished." And Namdev returned his devotion, saying, "Choka is my very life. Oh, what devotion he has! Oh, what devotion! I have come to this world for his sake. Those who contemplate on my Choka are saved from calamity and transgression." Again and again in his poetry, Choka says that he is speaking from experience, revealing what he has seen with his own eyes, not merely repeating what others say. "I am dazzled. The universe is filled with him from beginning to end. God has appeared within me, says Choka. Now all my doubts have dissolved. Not much is known of Choka's life, but legend has it that he died along with other laborers when a wall they were building collapsed on them. It is said that when his guru Namdev wanted to retrieve his remains, he found that Choka's bones were those that were heard murmuring, "Lord, Lord, Lord." Banka, Choka's brother-in-law and disciple, gives tribute to this great saint. Choka is the very image of purity. No dirt can ever cling to him. Choka is an ocean of bliss, the very storehouse of devotion. Choka's motherly love and grace give the shade under which we live in peace. Choka captivates the mind. Banka falls at his feet. Eknath the Compassionate. The sands on the banks of the Godavari River were burning in the midday heat. A child dressed in tattered clothes, dehydrated and thirsty, sat near the river, crying his heart out. An old man with a cooling wet leaf on his head walked by carrying a water container. He glanced at the child and exclaimed, "Oh no, a low-caste child." He sprinkled himself with water for purification, after seeing what he considered to be polluting, and turned away. Then he saw Eknath pick up the child and wrap him in a fine cloth. Startled by this sacrilege, the old man shouted a warning. "Eknath, it is a low-caste child." "Yes, but he is so thirsty that he can hardly breathe," were the words of Eknath, who did not only preach compassion, but was a living example of the compassionate life. A great-grandson of Sant Bhanudas, Eknath was born in 1533 at Patan, on the Godavari River in Maharashtra. His parents died while he was an infant, and he was brought up by his grandparents. He displayed spiritual leanings even as a child. It is recounted that by age 12 he had studied the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, and other Hindu holy books. At 12 or 13, Eknath left home without telling his grandparents and went to Devagiri, where he became a disciple of the scholar saint Janardhan Swami, learning accounting and assisting him in his work as a state official. Janardhan Swami used Eknath's practical education as a means of guiding him towards spiritual truths. It is related that on one occasion Janardhan Swami asked Eknath to balance some accounts. Eknath found a discrepancy of 1 adhela, equivalent to less than a penny, and worked all night to account for it. When he finally succeeded, he clapped with joy just as Janardhan Swami entered the room. Learning the reason for Eknath's elation, Janardhan Swami said, "If you practice devotion with the same seriousness, God will not be far from you." Because of his love and devotion for his guru, Eknath completely identified with him, saying that his master had swallowed his egoism and shown him the light within himself, which had neither any rising nor any setting. Eknath signed every abhang he wrote with a coupling of his and Janardhan's name, Eka Janardhani, and said that God himself serves him who regards his master as identical with the Lord. While he was with his guru, Eknath spent his free time in meditation and introspection. Janardhan Swami eventually told him to travel to holy places to listen to and deliver spiritual discourses. He also requested him to write a commentary on the Chatushloki Bhagavat in Marathi rather than Sanskrit. Footnote: the Chatushloki Bhagavat, from the 9th chapter of the 2nd canto of the Bhagavata Purana, is only 4 verses long, yet it summarizes the philosophy of this ancient Hindu scripture. It focuses on the oneness of God, his immanence throughout the creation, and the importance of the soul transcending illusion to realize its true self. End footnote. This book, also called Chatushloki Bhagavat, contains more than 1,000 couplets explaining the mystic teachings of these 4 verses in language the common people could understand. This book marked the beginning of Eknath's great literary output. After his travels, Eknath returned to his grandparents' home, and they requested that he marry. He did so obediently, marrying Girija, a spiritual woman who shared his values and was devoted to Eknath. They had 2 daughters and a son. By his own example, Eknath showed how to lead a spiritual life and at the same time lead a contented family life. He continued teaching and writing and drew many disciples to the path of devotion. Like a patient gardener, he worked to root out the weeds of inequality, appealing to his audience to treat each living being, whether human, animal, bird, or fish, with kindness and humanity. A number of stories are told that demonstrate this compassion. It is related that he and his wife took in a thief who had just been let out of jail, housing and feeding him until he could get back on his feet. Another account is given of one ruffian who decided to harass Eknath by spitting a mouthful of red pond juice on him as he left the river after his morning bath. Footnote: Pan, a preparation made from betel leaves and other ingredients which is chewed as a stimulant and digestive, producing red juice. End footnote. After he was spit upon, Eknath calmly returned to the river to wash himself. This happened again and again. The scoundrel kept spitting, and Eknath kept patiently returning to the river to wash. Finally, the young man started feeling guilty and asked him how he could maintain such calm. It is said that Eknath replied, "Brother, if you can stick so stubbornly to this habit of harassing sadhus, is it surprising that I should be able to stick to my equanimity? The dirt on my body can be easily cleansed by a dip in the river, but if I let anger enter my consciousness, it defiles the mind, and no amount of bathing can cleanse me of this impurity." Another story is told of his son, Hari Pandit, who was so embarrassed by his father's habit of preaching in Marathi and of eating in the homes of the poor and lower classes that he fled to Varanasi. When Eknath visited him to see what the problem was, Hari Pandit explained why he had left. Saddened, Eknath promised to give up his discourses and unorthodox ways. Hari Pandit then returned home and started giving discourses in Sanskrit, while Eknath remained silent. After a short time, however, people stopped attending Hari Pandit's discourses, clamoring for Eknath's clear, simple, and inspiring teachings. During this time, a widow invited Eknath to her home for a meal. Desiring to do a good deed, she wished to feed 1,000 Brahmins, but being poor, she could not. As she considered Eknath's spirituality worth that of at least 1,000 Brahmins, she invited him instead. Eknath turned to Hari Pandit for a decision. Although moved by her plight, Hari Pandit only agreed on condition that he could accompany Eknath and cook the food, because he did not want his father to accept food made by someone of low caste. After the meal, it is said that when Hari Pandit cleared the table and picked up Eknath's leaf plate, he found another leaf plate beneath it. Beneath that was still another leaf. Each time he picked up a leaf, he found another beneath it. Ultimately, he picked up 1,000 leaf plates. He then realized his arrogance. His father was worth 1,000 Brahmins and more. He fell at his feet, begging forgiveness. Eknath forgave him, saying, "You learned the scriptures, but not humility." Thereafter, Eknath resumed his preaching and other activities. Eknath ran afoul of the priestly class because of his appeal to the common people. It is said that after he completed the first 5 chapters of Eknathi Bhagavat, a commentary on the 11th canto of the Bhagavat Puran, a dialogue between Lord Krishna and his disciple Uddhav. One of his disciples took them to Varanasi and recited them on the banks of the Ganges River. Because Eknath wrote in Marathi, the language of the people, the pundits were upset at what they called pollution of the holy text, and summoned Eknath to Varanasi. He requested that he be allowed to present his work before judgment was passed, and told them that if they found anything objectionable or misinterpreted, they could drown the manuscript in the Ganges. Reluctantly, the pundits agreed. Eknath read out his work for all to hear. The intrinsic excellence of the book, with its moving mystical imagery, overcame all opposition. So much so, it is recounted that the people of Varanasi honored the book by carrying it on an elephant in a triumphal procession through the city. Eknath also critically edited the Jnaneshwari, Jnaneshwar's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, which had become corrupted over time. His painstaking efforts culminated in a version considered to be a true rendition of the original. To prevent further corruption, he added a line stating that anyone who thereafter inserted any verses of his own should be taken as having placed a hollowed shell of a coconut in a dish filled with ambrosia. As well as being a scholar of Sanskrit, Arabic, and Persian, Eknath wrote in other Indian languages besides Marathi, including Hindi, Telugu, and Kannada. He gave accounts of the lives of other saints and composed more than 4,000 abhangs. He also wrote over 300 baruds, dramatic poems remarkable for their ability to entertain people and attract them to bhakti, as both secular and spiritual meanings can be read into them. These baruds are still sung today. 40 of them were composed from the perspective of those of typically low-class occupations, showing the empathy he felt with people from the lowest social group. Gurudev Ranade praised him with these words: "With Jnaneshwar, philosophy reigned in the clouds. With Eknath, it came down upon earth and dwelt among men." Eknath's many other works include Rukmini Swayamvar, the story of Krishna's marriage to Rukmini, an allegorical tale of the union of the soul with the Lord, as well as Swatmasuk, joy of the soul, which explains that a guru is the key to the attainment of Brahman, the ultimate reality, and that the guru's grace makes the impossible possible. In his later work, Shakashtak, he reveals his basic philosophy using a parable told by Lord Krishna to his disciple Uddhav, which illustrates that joys and sorrows in our lives are not caused by supernatural powers, astrological events, or demonic forces, but by one's own thoughts, deeds, imagination, and memory. Krishna explains to Uddhav that to overcome joy and sorrow, the mind must be controlled. Bhakti, he advises, is the only means of doing this. Bhavarth Ramayan, a Marathi rendering of the classic epic Ramayana, was Eknath's last work and was completed by his disciple Gauba. V.Y. Kulkarni aptly pays the following tribute to Eknath using the titles of some of his works. Eknath was himself a Bhagavat, devotee of God. He achieved Chiranjeev Pad, immortality, and realized Swatmasuk, joy of the soul, and Anubhav Amrit, experience of nectar, to the full. And so he experienced the rise of Ananda Lahari, waves of happiness, due to Anand Anubhav, the experience of bliss. If Eknath had a signature teaching, it was to look upon all creatures as God. Eknath saw the divine everywhere and in everything, and it is clear that those who saw Eknath felt they had experienced God in action. Surely there could not have been a kinder, more compassionate and loving individual. A saint and lover of the Lord and all the Lord's creation, he left a legacy of love and a vast treasury of mystic knowledge to guide seekers toward the path of devotion he himself had traveled. Tukaram, Fountain of Inspiration. Born an ordinary merchant farmer, Tukaram was transformed into an extraordinary mystic, while always seeing himself as the humblest of men. One of the best-loved poet-mystics of Maharashtra, Tukaram lived a life absorbed in the Lord, so much so that wherever he looked he saw only the One. One of the stories told about him illustrates this engagement with the divine. One day, a farmer who was going on a trip asked Tukaram to keep watch over his fields. Tukaram gladly agreed, but he was so absorbed in remembrance of the name that when numerous birds started feasting on the crop, he saw them as the Lord and did nothing. When the farmer returned and saw the damage, he was outraged and brought Tukaram to the village council in order to have him punished. But when the corn was weighed, it is said that the grain was 10 times the expected weight. In his state of absorption in Nam and the Lord, Tukaram proclaims, "God is the giver, and God is the enjoyer. What else remains to be said? Whatever I see is filled with him." Tukaram was born in 1598 in a village close to Pune in Maharashtra. His father, Balhoba, supported the family by cultivating his own land and selling the produce in his shop. Balhoba was a religious man, and although he was busy as a merchant farmer, he was also deeply devoted to the family deity Vittal. In fact, his entire family was noted for their devotion to God, and Tukaram inherited this legacy. As was the custom, Tukaram was married when he was only 13. His wife suffered from ill health, so according to the custom then, his father had him marry again and provide for both wives. Tukaram led a householder's life and assisted his father with the family business. They enjoyed prosperity and a comfortable life with servants to help in the home and in cultivating their land. But fortune did not continue to smile on him. In 1615, when Tukaram was still in his teens, he lost his parents. In 1619, he had to face a devastating famine that ravaged the country. The monsoons failed for a few years, and Tukaram's business continued its downward spiral, making it difficult for him to fend off the predatory moneylenders. Relatives and friends who earlier had been honored guests at his house deserted him when he was bankrupt and beset with problems. It came to the point where the household had no provisions for even a daily meal. His first wife and a son died of starvation, and whatever cattle had survived the famine also perished. It is related that his second wife taunted and harassed him because he was unable to support the family. His life was misery, darkness, and disappointment. Even though circumstances deprived him of material security, the challenges of his life had a positive impact on Tukaram. Disillusionment with the world and its precarious ways brought about a transformation of his attitude, and his latent spiritual yearning surged within him. He came to the conclusion that the loss of his wealth, parents, first wife, and son was a blessing in disguise, as it freed him from all attachments and liberated his wife and son from worldly suffering. He thanked God for his quarrelsome second wife, because if she had been good and sympathetic, he would have been attached to her. Having turned his face towards God, Tukaram began to study holy books, including the works of Kabir, Jnaneshwar, Namdev, and Eknath. His longing for God became intense. Recognizing that meditation is the key to God realization, he started spending most of his time in the solitude of the nearby hills. Tukaram prayed fervently to the Lord to send him a guru to give him proper guidance on the spiritual path. In 1619, during this period of intensive meditation and prayer, Tukaram's master, Babaji Raghava Chaitanya, showered his grace and initiated Tukaram, who was then only 21. Tukaram continued his meditation according to his master's instructions, But in spite of his sincere devotion, God did not reveal himself. Tukaram intensified his efforts and started meditating for longer periods. Stay seated in your place, concentrate the mind, and call out to God with all your heart. Ceaselessly repeat the name. I swear by the Lord that there is no easier way, he says. He did not care about his body and often went without food for days. However, despite all his endeavors, he was denied the vision of the Lord. He continued to pray, sometimes in a tone of solicitude, sometimes cajolement, sometimes even complaint. "Oh Lord, why aren't you saying anything? I am so desperate to hear your words. Why are you so indifferent? Oh Lord, hurry to help me. I feel like a fish out of water, like a child waiting to meet its mother." As his poems record, at last the Lord accepted his petition and granted him glimpses of his grace. His joy knew no bounds. I see God's face, and this vision gives me infinite bliss. My mind is riveted on it, and I cling to his feet. As I look at him, all my mental agony vanishes. Tukaram had become a Jivan Mukta, one who attains liberation while living, who reaches the heights of inner experience. He merged into the Lord as camphor merges into fire. Tukaram did not retire into solitude to enjoy his bliss, however, but instead began the third phase of his life, imparting his message to seekers of spirituality. He gave discourses in colloquial Marathi, appealing to a wide audience, and composed more than 5,000 abhangs in Marathi, filled with treasures of spiritual wisdom accessible to all. Come to me, one and all, young and old, women and men. I shall carry all of you to the other shore. The Lord has sent me to this world as a bearer of his name. When people began to revere the low-caste Tukaram as a saint, the Brahmins started feeling jealous. They considered it sacrilegious and blasphemous for him to compose abhangs and give spiritual discourses. They tried their best to harass and discredit him, but he endured all with calm and compassion. The story is told of one Mambaji Gosavi, who was a Brahmin preacher as well as Tukaram's neighbor. He became jealous of Tukaram's popularity and also had a personal complaint against him. One day, a buffalo belonging to Tukaram's family forced its way into Mambaji's garden and ate his vegetables. Mambaji seized the opportunity to beat Tukaram with thorny sticks. Tukaram accepted the beating calmly while repeating the name to keep his attention in the Lord. But then Mambaji became ill and experienced great physical pain. Having learned of his trouble, Tukaram at once went to him and massaged his body, and the pain disappeared. Mambaji, touched by Tukaram's kindness and humility, felt deep remorse for his behavior and became a changed man. Tukaram led an intensely spiritual life until he died at the age of 52. His last words were memorable. "I am going to my native land. I bid farewell to all." Although he passed away 4 centuries ago, he is still fondly remembered even in remote parts of Maharashtra. In the words of Professor S.R. Sharma, the renowned early 19th century historian who wrote several books on Tukaram, Tuka was, is, and will ever remain a pillar of light, a beacon of hope, a perennial fountain of inspiration, on account of all that he said and did. Samarth Ramdas, wedded to the Lord. Chanting mantras, the priest began preparing the offering of clarified butter, and the wedding guests readied themselves for the muhurt, the solemn moment when the sacred vows of the young couple would be recited before the holy fire. It was the wedding of a proud 12-year-old boy, Narayan, later known as Ramdas, and Banaji Bua's little daughter. The bride, her eyes aglow with excitement, steadied her hand on Narayan's as the wedding rituals were performed. The priest lit the fire, and the bride and the bridegroom stood up to garland each other. As they readied themselves, the priest, as required by tradition, uttered the word "Saudan," take care, beware. At this, Narayan's mind lurched. The word struck him like a divine warning, reaching him through the wall of ceremony. With the agility of a jungle cat, he bolted away from the marriage hall and disappeared, not to be seen again by his family for nearly 24 years. So is told the story of Ram Das's wedding day. Born in the Jalna district of Maharashtra on 15th March 1608, Narayan was the second son of a revenue officer who died when Narayan was still a child. As a youngster, Narayan was mischievous and active, climbing trees, swimming in rivers, riding horses, and wrestling. Though often naughty, he was exceptionally brilliant. By the age of 12, he was well versed in Sanskrit, the Vedas, and other scriptures. His elder brother was more serious in disposition and deportment, since after his father's death, all responsibility fell on his shoulders. He gave initiation by imparting sacred mantras to his disciples. Narayan too asked for initiation, but his brother refused, telling him he first had to be serious in life. Narayan's carefree behavior also troubled his mother. One day she rebuked him, impressing upon him the urgent need to be serious, mature, and responsible. Shaken by her words, he went to a dark room and sat pondering over his mother's admonition. After a long time, his mother went to ask him how he was, and he said, "I am worried about life and the world," and then expressed his desire to renounce worldly life. Upon hearing this, she became distressed, thinking that he might become absorbed in spirituality and forget his responsibilities to the family, so she decided to get him married. At first he agreed, but on hearing the warning "Saudan" during the marriage ceremony, he fled from his home. After walking for a few days, he found a cave at the confluence of the Godavari and Nandina rivers, and started his meditation, which he continued for 12 years. He never wasted even a minute of his time. Focused only on his spiritual quest, he spent his time meditating, reading spiritual literature, and performing yoga exercises, since he believed that a life of spirituality required physical health. It is not clear who Ram Das's master was, but in his writings he emphasizes the importance of the company of saints and the necessity of a master. At the end of this period, it appears that he took the name Ram Das, meaning servant of Lord Ram. Thereafter he traveled throughout India, going far north to Nepal and to Kabul and Kandahar in present-day Afghanistan. In Srinagar, Kashmir, he met disciples of Guru Nanak. After this 12-year journey, he came back to his native village to meet his mother. She had become blind and was unable to see him, but was blissfully happy to be with him again. Pleased with his spiritual attainments, she gave him her blessings and her consent for him to live a renunciate's life. Ram Das decided to spend his life helping to awaken the social and spiritual consciousness of the people of Maharashtra. He established more than 1,000 mutts, spiritual centers, and taught his followers how to improve not only their worldly lives, but more importantly, how to achieve the permanent benefits of leading a life of spirituality. We lose all worry, become fearless, and lose our ego if we let the Lord take charge. Let go. Ram Das revived and spread the path of bhakti for spiritual illumination, declaring that the bhakti marg is the sure path for God realization. He said, when someone recognizes that he does not belong to the world, but to the Lord, that is bhakti. He was an able and inspiring speaker and wrote abhangs and books covering all aspects of life. Because of his ardent devotion to Ram and his natural abilities, people called him Samarth Ram Das, capable and powerful servant of Lord Ram. Samarth Ramdas taught the people that idol worship is not sufficient for God realization. For real spiritual progress, the seeker has to graduate to the inner practice of remembrance of the name. People vainly worship deities in their households, or go hunting after the gods in places of pilgrimage, or try to find them in different incarnations. They do not know the Supreme God, who can be known only by the eye of spiritual vision. We should become identical with Him by constant meditation on His name. This is indeed a subtle process that can be made known to us in an instant's time by a great spiritual teacher. He said that spiritual pilgrimage is not a physical action, but an internal process that is long and arduous. Salvation is not easy. It requires determination, renunciation of our attachments, one-pointed concentration, high moral standards, and careful discrimination between good and bad, true and false. According to Ramdas, worldly and spiritual life are not opposed. They are two aspects of the same life and can and should be balanced. Ramdas himself was an example of this. He gave advice on the gardens and plants at the centers he established, helped with the architecture of one of King Shivaji's forts, and participated in all aspects of life. He gave political as well as spiritual advice to his disciple, King Shivaji, the founder of the Maratha kingdom. Shivaji was so devoted to his guru that he wanted to give his entire kingdom to Ramdas and spend his time in devotion. But Ramdas discouraged this and told Shivaji that it was his duty to take care of his kingdom. Ramdas had seen the situation of life in India and neighboring countries, and knew that a worthy and strong king was required to provide leadership to the people. Samarth Ramdas left behind a rich literary treasure. His writings reflect his life experiences as well as his spirituality. Part of his great appeal is that his works show that he, like other spiritual greats, went through his daily life and struggles and eventually overcame his limitations and outer circumstances. This is something that gives everyone hope. It was badly needed by the people of his time and is still relevant today. Ramdas's two most important works are Manaje Shlok and Das Bodh. In Manaje Shlok, Anthology of Verses, Ramdas advises the mind to behave in an ethical way and to devote itself to the love of God. In this work, he addresses his own mind because he felt that before advising others, it was better that he advised his own mind and tried to control it. Knowing that the mind is responsible for our entrapment in the world and the cycle of birth and death, as well as our struggle to obtain salvation, he says, "You've been given the inner secret, O mind, but now you must do the work within. Listen to spiritual discourses, spend your time with mystics. You'll surely be blessed with realization." Das Bodh literally means knowledge gained by the servant. It is his most revered work and is an invaluable manual of instruction and information. It deals mainly with spirituality, but also discusses proper worldly behavior, focusing on devotion, true knowledge, detachment, and worldly wisdom. Ramdas's spiritual struggles, which caused him a great deal of mental anguish, are expressed in Karunashtake, poetry of compassion and tenderness. The poetry expresses the condition of his mind when he was a struggling devotee. It is overflowing with devotion to the Lord and the feelings of his heart as he cries out to the Lord in his earnest desire for his darshan. He also wrote Laghu Ramayana, Short Ramayana, a commentary on 2 chapters of the Ramayana, as well as other poems and abhangs. Ramdas died in 1682. His last instructions to his disciples were, "Do not think much of your bodily wants. Have satsang with devotees. Keep the image of the Lord in your heart. Repeat the name of the Lord always. Annihilate lust, greed, anger, hatred, and egoism. See the Lord in all creatures. Love all. Feel his presence everywhere. Live for him alone. Serve him in all beings. Make total and unreserved surrender unto him. You will always live in him alone. You will attain immortality and eternal bliss." Bahinabai, devoted disciple and wife. Bahinabai, born in 1628 into a Brahmin family at Deogao, east of Verul in Maharashtra, lived her life reconciling her difficult childhood and marriage with her intense devotion to the Lord. She demonstrated throughout her life and works that love and duty to spouse and family, even under demanding circumstances, does not have to conflict with devotion to the Lord. O God, you alone are my friend, my very own brother, and the advocate of the lowly. In worshiping you, I can still be true to my duty of devotion to my husband. Bahinabai chronicled her life in a series of autobiographical verses that give us a rich picture of her continuous struggles and the means she used to overcome her problems. She also composed inspiring abhangs, exhorting those who gathered around her to live life as she did, a life of devotion to the Lord, Guru, and Nam, coupled with surrender to God's will. Although Bahinabai had a burning desire for God practically from birth, at that time women were forbidden to participate in sacred rituals and worship. She had no formal education nor access to the scriptures, both being closed to girls of that time. She lamented being born in the form of a woman, which led to her separation from the worship of God in this life. In this life as a woman, I have no right to listen to the Vedas, and the Gayatri mantra has been kept secret by Brahmins. I should not pronounce the sacred word Om. I should not listen to philosophical ideas. I should not speak of these things with others. Bahina says, "My soul is restless. God has no compassion on me." Footnotes. 1. Gayatri Mantra, the most famous of all mantras or invocations in Hinduism. 2. Om, a sacred syllable in Hinduism representing Brahman, the impersonal absolute. Om is chanted to help attain higher consciousness. End footnotes. In her verses, Bahinabai tells of her struggles and challenges in both her worldly and spiritual life, and relates how her one-pointed devotion helped her through all her troubles. She was from a Brahmin family of modest means. Her father was a poor village scribe who had problems with his relatives. While still a young child, she was betrothed to Gangadhar, a widower whom she called honest, wise, and learned. When the family's domestic troubles grew extreme, they had to flee their village, and in their wanderings suffered many hardships. But they were finally able to settle in Kolhapur with a Brahmin who gave them shelter. Bahina had been devoted to God from early childhood, and in Kolhapur she was able to focus on her spiritual life. She devoted her time to meditation, the constant remembrance of God, and attending spiritual gatherings. She became well known in the town, and people started visiting her to hear her devotional songs and discussions. Her husband grew upset with her for devoting so much time to worship of God, but she continued her devotion. Her growing popularity and the admiration the townspeople had for her saintly nature vexed him because he, a priest, a reciter of the Vedas, was being ignored. He vented his rage on her, beating her and abusing her. Her response was not complaint, but acceptance. God makes us suffer in order to test our determination. During an illness, she started having visions of the great mystic Tukaram, whose verses she had heard, and declared him her guru, although she had not yet met him. But her devotion to Tukaram made her husband even more resentful and jealous. That his wife should be venerated by some because of her devotion and sincerity, or even worse, mocked by those who were shocked at her association with a lower caste saint. He beat her and tied her up. He even threatened to leave, despite her being pregnant at the time. But he then became terribly ill. Certain he was dying, he attributed his suffering to his rejection of Tukaram and his wife's devotion. In his delirium, a Brahmin appeared to him and told him to accept Bahina, saying she was truly a bhakta of God, and it was his good fortune to be associated with her. Gangadhar recovered from his illness and told Bahina they would now give themselves fully to the worship of God. Bahina commented on this change. What is there that God cannot do? They decided to go to Dehu, a holy place near Pune, where Bahina was finally able to meet Tukaram. Bahina says of this moment, "I was unburdened of my pride and the sorrows of worldly life when I met Tukaram. Blessed is my life. I have easily become one who has accomplished her purpose." In Dehu, Bahina and her family dedicated themselves to serving Tukaram and living the life of devotion that he advocated. Bahina Bai's verses are filled with devotion to her guru. She says, "My master, lord, and king, my very life, I'll keep my head bowed at his feet, and he'll make me remember his name. I'll watch for him within my heart, and he will appear. Once you have the company of saints, there will be no missing the Lord. Even gods wish for their company and wish to serve the saints. The greatness of saints is incomparable." The harassment by those who resented a Brahmin's family following a lower caste guru did not cease, however, and her husband found it difficult to stand up to threats against the family, causing her endless suffering. Yet she surrendered to her Lord, saying that although God was causing her suffering through her husband, she would not leave the worship of God, even if it meant her death. During this time, she would often go to the bank of the Indrayani River for meditation. It was here that she was inspired to compose poetry that found expression in about 400 abhangs on spirituality, in addition to her 88 autobiographical verses. In these verses, she depicts her devotion to God, her guru, and her husband. It appears that all three merged in her heart. She was patient, and in due course of time, although she passed through many struggles, she achieved reconciliation between her worldly and spiritual duties, realizing all to be part of the Lord's plan. She says, "Blessed is she who is a dutiful wife. She manages both family and spiritual life. She alone catches heaven in her hands. Duty is God, and God is duty. She who recognizes this secret, she who constantly thinks of the Lord, she alone is a dutiful wife in all three worlds." Bahina was devastated when Tukaram left this worldly existence in 1649. After a time, she came to stay near Samarth Ramdas. Finally, he passed away too in 1681. Not much is said of her later years until she knew that the time of her death was near. She called her son to her and passed peacefully, knowing she was finally bound for her true divine abode. Bahina's verses, still popular in Maharashtra, are sometimes called women's poems because women sing them at home and in the fields as they work. In her Abhangs, she speaks of the difficulties of controlling the mind and of the ways in which these difficulties can be overcome, drawing on her personal experience to illustrate the points she makes. She tells us that our mind can be our friend if it realizes that it can find happiness, not by chasing the mirages of illusion, but by living as the mystics do, loving God. O dear friend, my good mind, I beg you, listen to my plea. Drop this I, the face of the ego. Be peaceful, be happy. How much longer will you wander, working my body to exhaustion? Feel shame before the mystics for how you live. They took a different path, says Bahina, that let them be happy, loving God. Bahina did not believe in austerities or exhausting the body by extreme asceticism, asking how one can meditate if the body is weakened. She said, no need for yoga, breath control, or sacrifice. The essence of spiritual practice is something different. Taking refuge in Nam, she said, the name of the Lord is the boat for taking humans across the ocean of existence. Footnote: Ocean of existence, a reference to the creation where the soul is separated from the Lord. End footnote. Rather than being defeated by circumstances, Bahina came out of her sufferings purer and stronger. For her, the source of inspiration and comfort was always her guru, Tukaram. Blackness and whiteness may disappear when washed, but can fire drop its burning nature? Our fate never leaves us. Even a wise man's head will receive a blow. Can water drop its quality of coolness? How, then, can the mind drop its fickleness? Bahina says, this question will be thrown away when one gazes at the feet of one's Satguru. Footnote: Satguru, true, Sat, spiritual teacher, Guru. End footnote.